The October 15th, 2024 episode of the Maniacs podcast, hosted by Robyn Torgrimson, centers on significant allegations against World Harvest Church and its leadership, particularly Rod Parsley and his family. This episode opens the floodgates for a detailed and scathing critique of WHC's culture, leadership, and ethical shortcomings. The episode's tone is deeply critical, exposing a systemic pattern of alleged misconduct, financial mismanagement, and a toxic work environment. The episode covers several explosive topics, each worthy of condemnation. Sexual harassment allegations. One of the most damning parts of the podcast is the discussion of sexual harassment claims dating back to a 1993 newspaper article, which accuses Rod Parsley's father, Clyde Parsley, of repeatedly harassing a church employee. The accuser sued because, according to the episode, the church fostered a culture of punishing those who try to speak out, rather than the perpetrators of such abuse. Even more troubling, these claims were never adequately addressed, with Clyde Parsley retaining his position within the church. This blatant disregard for accountability creates a harrowing picture of a church more concerned with its public image than with providing justice for victims of abuse. Leadership and accountability. The podcast emphasizes the utter lack of accountability among WHC leaders. Allegations of misconduct, whether it be sexual harassment or other unethical behaviors, are repeatedly covered up, allowing the perpetrators to remain in their positions. The toxic leadership style of Rod Parsley, described as tyrannical, has fostered a culture where leaders are not held accountable. This extends beyond sexual misconduct, impacting other operational aspects, including financial transparency and staff treatment. Cultural and racial issues. The podcast raises deeply troubling allegations about cultural and racial insensitivity within the church. One standout moment involves accusations against Ashton Parsley, Rod's daughter, for making racially insensitive comments, including derogatory remarks about black people. There are also claims that the church leadership discourages interracial relationships, pointing to a deeply ingrained cultural bias. These issues expose WHC as not just indifferent to diversity and inclusion, but actively working against these principles in its internal culture. Toxic work environment. Torgrimson shares personal stories about the toxic environment she experienced while working at WHC. Staff members were subject to intimidation, unrealistic demands, and a lack of support from leadership. Employees were reportedly forced to cover up inappropriate behaviors, and those who tried to speak out faced severe consequences, reinforcing the hostile atmosphere. This work culture mirrors a larger pattern of neglect and abuse of power that exists within the church's structure. Another cornerstone of the episode's critique is the lack of financial transparency at WHC. Torgrimson questions the church's non-profit status, noting that despite growing demands from the congregation, Rod Parsley has refused to provide any real accounting of how donations are spent. The opacity of financial dealings casts a shadow over WHC's ethical standing, especially considering the lavish lifestyles of its leaders. The financial mismanagement issue extends to WHC's associated entities, such as Valor Christian College and Harvest Prep, with serious concerns raised about whether church funds are being appropriately handled. The podcast does an excellent job of emphasizing the emotional and psychological toll WHC's environment takes on both staff and congregation members. Torgrimson details how employees and churchgoers alike experience immense pressure, often leading to burnout, disillusionment, and a decline in spiritual and mental health. Many of those who left the church reported lasting emotional scars, a testament to how deeply harmful the culture at WHC has become. Public reaction to the revelations discussed on the podcast varies greatly. While many listeners and former WHC members express support for the individuals brave enough to come forward, loyalists to the church defend the leadership, often attacking those who speak out. This polarization within the community only serves to deepen the divide between the church's followers and those disillusioned by its conduct. The podcast effectively highlights how entrenched church members are in defending their leaders, even in the face of overwhelming evidence of wrongdoing. In a sobering conclusion, the episode speculates on the future of WHC, raising serious doubts about its sustainability without significant reforms. The host questions whether the church can survive the ongoing controversies and declining attendance without a drastic change in leadership and culture. The once thriving ministry is now a shell of its former self, with attendance numbers dropping to only a fraction of what they once were. Conclusion. The October 15th, 2024 episode of the Mega Maniacs podcast serves as a powerful condemnation of World Harvest Church, painting a picture of an organization riddled with ethical and moral failures. From sexual harassment to financial mismanagement, the episode leaves no stone unturned in its dissection of WHC's deeply flawed leadership and culture. Torgrimson's first-hand accounts, along with testimonies from former employees and churchgoers, form a compelling narrative of systemic abuse, cover-ups, and a complete lack of accountability within the organization. In this thorough examination of WHC's ongoing issues, Torgrimson does more than just expose the church's failings. She provides a voice for those who have suffered in silence. This episode underscores the need for accountability, transparency, and reform within World Harvest Church and organizations like it. Without these changes, the future of WHC appears bleak, its reputation irreparably damaged by the very leadership meant to uphold its values.